It's time. It all comes down to this. Forget about regular season wins. Forget about stage titles. This is what really matters. This is where we see who will rise to the occasion and who will crumble under the Hawaiian sun. This is the Overwatch League playoffs. Who do I think will be the champions? And whose season will have all been for nothing? Watch this whole video to find out. So the playoffs are starting very soon. If you want to know the teams that made it here, watch my last video. But in this video I'm going to be running through my predicted bracket for the most exciting time in the Overwatch League calendar. The playoffs. We are going to see a mixture of East and West teams battle it out to see who comes out on top to be crowned the champions of Season 4. Because let's be honest, who actually cares about regular season wins? We all know Grand Finals is where it's at. It's definitely going to be an especially exciting playoffs, as a portion of these teams didn't actually make it to Hawaii in the regular season, so we haven't seen them play against any of the teams from the opposite region. Anyway, enough hyping this up, let's take a look at my bracket. I'm going to be ordering these in terms of seeding rather than time, because that's just how it's listed on the website. So for the first game we see Shanghai choose to try to get their revenge after last year's playoff loss to the San Francisco Shock. And to be honest with you, I don't see a chance for Shock to win this one. Let's put it this way, if the Dragons lose this, I'll be San Francisco shocked. Forget about past years because they don't matter. What matters now is how the Shock looks with the team they are competing in the playoffs with. And that team is mediocre compared to some of the other teams in this playoff. I see this going 3-1 to the Dragons. That one map win from the Shock coming from a really good map pick for them that the Dragons just can't do anything on against probably a rush comp with Super in. But then even if Shanghai mirror this comp on a map where that is prevalent, I still think they have a chance to win it, which is why it's not a scoreline of 3-2. I've given it 3-1 to Dragons. In my eyes, the Dragons are the best team in the playoffs. They have to be the favourites to win the Grand Finals. And a team of that calibre going up against a team who hasn't been that astounding this season only has one outcome, a Shanghai victory. Now, don't get me confused. I get that people say Shock are only being seen as not great because previously they were incredible and they're constantly being compared to those great seasons. I get that point, but that's not what I'm doing here. No matter how good or bad their previous seasons were, look at this season. I'm not saying they're a bad team, I didn't say that once. I just see them as a team who don't have the highest peaks in the league and are consistently up there with the S or A tier teams, but never dominate those positions. And come on, we're in playoffs now. If you want me to pred this team, they have to be dominating those positions. It's just part of the criteria for you to get far in this bracket. Also, you may be surprised by some of my later predictions, as I have teams who wouldn't usually be considered worse than Shock going further than them. But keep in mind, we've not seen incredible peaks from the Shock at all this season, whereas some of the other teams have had incredibly high peak potential, which we've seen in their most recent showings. So that's it for the Shock Shanghai game. I see Shanghai progressing in the winners bracket, whereas Shock drop down to the losers. So for the next game, we see the LA Gladiators taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. The Gladiators started to really get into their element in the most recent regular season tournaments, where they looked absolutely incredible. They took the Countdown Cup home in very, very dominant and impressive fashion, and have to have a good opportunity to go in the playoffs here. Many of their players have recently shown us that they are really, really great. Not that we didn't think they were great before, but they've proven to us that they're truly incredible. On the other side, we have the Fusion, who, without a doubt, are also at the peak of their seasons. While having their full roster playing for a couple of stages now, they've only really recently started playing to a high standard in the play-ins, where they looked phenomenal. Call me bad armchair analyst, but when I saw the Fusion play in the play-ins, there was no clear factor I could pinpoint as a negative for this team. However, that was the play-ins. Now it's playoffs. Pretty much all of these teams have been at the same point and been considered the same standard, or even surpassed the level of play we've seen from the Fusion recently that we're so hyped up about. And I think the Gladiators is one of those teams. That's why I'm predicting the Gladiators to take this one 3-1. I don't deny how great the Fusion have looked recently, and I'd say them and the Justice are the most volatile teams here who could really beat anyone or lose to anyone. So there is definitely upset potential for the Fusion in this game. But you'll see as I reveal my bracket further and further that I have the Gladiators going so far. So it can't be surprising that I have the Fusion losing this first game against them. The support and DPS line of Gladiators we knew would be great this season, but Space has impressed me a lot. I honestly thought he was coming to the end of his career, as recently I hadn't been too impressed with him, but this season he has been very, very impressive, and definitely a playoff-worthy player. Okay, the next game up we have the Washington Justice versus the Dallas Fuel. And put your seatbelts on, guys, because we're going for a ride with this one. So on one side we've got the Washington Justice. You know their story by now. I always love talking about the Justice. They've been pretty poor most of the season. They beat bad teams, admittedly, but then when it comes to face the big dogs, they have just looked absolutely terrible. at times to put it frankly. But hear me out. Play-ins. These guys have looked like juggernauts. Don't let anyone downplay how well they were doing because of their past games. Throughout the season, when these guys were failing, people would still refer back to their old games saying they had high peaks. Well, what if I told you now, those people saying those old high peaks were nothing compared to these play-in high peaks? Assassin is going to always be a question mark, so I feel little need to even mention his name, but come on, man. How many times have I got to say, put some respect on Bebe and Closer's names? Why are we comparing Bebe and Closer to players that pop off every single game? Because think about it this way. What teams actually have a 6-man roster of pop-off players in at all times? I can think of one. I can think of a single team that has that. The Shanghai Dragons, the best team in my eyes. The best team has that. Why are we comparing Bebe and Closer to all these other teams that don't have that and not saying the same points for them? What I'm trying to say is stop judging Bebe and Closer based on how flashy they are or how pop-off they are or how much they're lighting up the kill feed or what big plays they're getting. Doesn't have to be eliminations. Because look at the Justice roster. I don't want that. When you have players like Mag and Assassin and Decay on your team, I don't want any more volatility from the support line. I want them to be stable. I don't want to be relying on them to make the plays. And even if I'm not relying on them, I don't want them to be the ones having to do it anyway. Because often when you see too many players trying to do the big shit, it just falls. It's just disastrous. And adding in another player or another 2 players that do this will just ruin this team in the support line. And that's my TED talk on why Bebe and Closer are actually a really, really good backline for this team. Thanks for listening. Okay, but on the other side, you got the Dallas Fuel. Now, you're probably going to expect me to predict Dallas Fuel. Maybe if you're new, you'll expect that. Maybe if you watch my videos, you will not, because you know I'm a big Washington simp. However, the Dallas Fuel looked phenomenal. Stage 1, even Stage 2 when they came second. Stage 3, beginning that slump, and then holy moly, in their recent showings they were abysmal. Alright, say that Dallas Fuel weren't trying, or say that they were just attempting to play new compositions that they weren't good at, but my job here is to take what we've seen and use it to predict what we're going to see. And what I see is a Dallas Fuel roster that fell the hell off. The star power of the Fuel is always something to keep in mind. Given the right heroes, given the right compositions, they can take down any team, and I truly believe that. But just look at where they're meeting. If we have a graph here, they're crossing over. Washington's on the up, and Dallas is on the down, and boys, I'm going to have to predict Washington to win this one in a very, very tight 3-2 series. There's 2 strategies we could see come out from Washington, because I think it's fairly straightforward what we're going to see with the map picks from the Dallas Fuel. Dallas is going to want to stick to the Winston, possibly the Rush, but that's where Washington still could upset them. But Dallas Fuel is definitely going to want to stick on maps where that Winston comp is very prevalent. The problem is Washington is going to want to do similar things, so if you're Justice going up against the Fuel, do you A, try and mirror the Fuel on monkey comps which you're best on, but they're also considered by many the best in the league on? Or do you try and play around their weaknesses, maybe get a couple of ball maps, because Mag isn't truly abysmal on it. I mean, he's definitely better than Fearless on the ball, and then you might come down to a bit of a Sombra battle if Assassin's having a good day, but it's Doha, so he's pretty good, so that's going to be tough. So the big question is, are you going to pick to your strengths, which are also the Fuel strengths, or are you going to try and play to Dallas's weaknesses? And to be honest, the map picks could truly be the make or break for this series. Okay, so the last game for this first batch of matches is going to be the Atlanta Reign versus the Chengdu Hunters, and after this game I'm going to basically just speed you through my bracket. I'm barely going to give any analysis on the games because I've given a decent chunk of analysis for each team, I hope, here. So you could just see who I've got winning. Any further questions, ask in the comments if you want another video. I'm actually down, but here, we'll just go for it. Atlanta Reign versus Chengdu Hunters. So the first thing I want to say is, if I was a GM of one of these teams, this might surprise you, and I'll give some pros and cons on it, but the Atlanta Reign would have actually been my first pick. This is not me saying Atlanta Reign is the worst team here, because I think we can all agree on a given day, they're by far not the worst team here. They're pushing for the top half of the teams here, if anything. But I feel the consistency of Atlanta Reign is actually something that would encourage me to pick them. You pretty much know what you're going to get, but that might have been what actually deterred others away from it, where it would kind of entice me, and I'll explain why. So let's assume we're going to see Atlanta Reign play a double shield or a Risa Diva composition, because that's what they like playing. Let's say it's a map for that. I guess stylistically, this would scare a lot of the teams that we're actually picking, because most of the teams in the playoffs here do enjoy playing a lot of the dive with the monkey or with the ball. And what we've seen from the Orisa compositions from the Atlanta Reign is often it can be the kryptonite of the fast-paced compositions. So I guess that's why people would have been scared to pick them. Also, they might have just been scared to pick them because they are a pretty good team all round, where you could have gone with a flashy team like Washington or Fusion and hope they're having a bad day. The Atlanta Reign, you kind of know they're going to be at a pretty solid level, and if you don't think you're at that level, obviously you don't want to pick them. But now talking about the Atlanta Reign as an actual team, I do have to highlight that Pelican will be on high ping or will not be played at all here. And oh boy, what a time for a team to not have their star player. I mean, if Pelican is on high ping on Tracer, or if Pelican's not playing at all, there is going to be extremely high chance Atlanta Reign goes out very quickly. There's not much more really to say on that, because we all know Pelican is the driving force of this team, and we haven't seen a ton of other factors influencing how their games turn out other than Pelican, so I don't really have much reason to believe any of their other players are going to make a big impact on this game if Pelican's not in, or if Pelican isn't playing to the standard we want him to. On the other side, you got the Chengdu Hunters, and Chengdu Hunters have got to be up there with one of the best teams. I mean, even though they're, fourth pick here, I think, I still consider them really up there. They're definitely second best in APAC, there's no denying that, and to be honest, they're quite similar to Atlanta Reign in the sense of their consistency. Now, it's Chengdu Hunters. If someone hasn't watched all this season, they're going to think I am on crack saying that. Anyone that's watched this season knows that that is true. I personally would be extremely frightened to go up against the Chengdu Hunters, as I actually think they're one of the more well-rounded teams at this stage. I mean, if you take them to a Rhine map, Gaga's fine playing Rhine and the whole team's fine playing Rush. If you take them to a dive map, Gaga can play the Monkey and can play the Wrecking Ball. I'm only highlighting the main tank here because, I mean, he would probably be the most influential part of the team. And also, the other guys can just flex. We already know that. Getting a bit off track, though. So, if I was going up against the Chengdu Hunters, I'd be afraid. I mean, they're flexible. It's going to be difficult to find map picks that they are not comfortable with. Atlanta Reign is definitely just going to want to bring it to them in a double shield or Orisa Diva situation. Try and get those maps. If we're seeing a dive mirror, I think there's no chance Atlanta Reign wins this. Even if we're seeing a rush mirror, I think Chengdu should be able to take this way, and that's why I'm going quite close. 3-2 to the Chengdu Hunters, because Atlanta Reign should be able to win on their map picks. They should be able to get Orisa maps, possibly win on Rhine maps, and they should be able to get a couple of maps, but I still think Chengdu is going to win this overall. Right, you ready? Now it's time to speed run the rest of my bracket. If you want another video on this, comment down below. Comment any questions you have about the bracket as well, I can address them in the video. But here we go. The Elimination Bracket 1. Shock versus Fusion. Fusion take that way. Sorry for the upset, but I already mentioned their volatility, and you getting up against the Shock. I already expressed how I feel about them this season, so no three-peat for you. I think that's going to be 3-2 to the Fusion. I think that will be a tight one. Then we've got the Fuel versus Atlanta Reign, and we're going to say bye-bye to the Atlanta Reign in a 3-0 to the Dallas Fuel. I feel like Atlanta Reign is just going to suffer from similar issues that they do in their Chengdu Hunters game, to be honest. They're just not going to be able to mirror dives. Rush, I think they will certainly lose in this matchup, and I think that should actually be a 3-0 to the Dallas Fuel, because I feel even on maps where it might favour Atlanta Reign's comp, I feel like Dallas Fuel will just be able to force Winston or Reinhardt and get the job done. Alright, now on to the winners bracket 2. We've got the Shanghai Dragons going to be knocking down the LA Gladiators to the lower bracket, and I think Shanghai's going to take that. Have a bit of a problem, but not too much. 3-1 I think should do the trick. And I think here is just a big team diff, skill diff. I don't think there's much Gladiators will be able to do. They could come up with something super scary in compositions that we haven't seen before, but I think if they address anything we've seen all season from them and from the Shanghai Dragons, Shanghai should be able to win in a mirror matchup. Then we've got the Washington Justice versus the Chengdu Hunters, and I've got the Justice losing this one. I'm sure all of you guys are screaming at me for them to lose that game because you don't like it when I pray Justice to win. I think Justice actually definitely have a shot here, because if they win that first game, I think they could be able to take down the Hunters, most definitely if they continue playing on that trajectory. I think the Hunters team play is really going to get the better of the Justice's team play. Now I say that when we look at their play-ins games, I think the Justice was actually playing really well as a team, so if they improve upon that, I think they definitely have a chance in this game. But from the majority of the season, what we see, I think the Hunters team play is much better, and in playoffs when you're really at a high caliber, you're not going to want to be relying on individual plays from Decay, for example, to win you through these games. Okay, then we've got the elimination round 2. The first game up, Fusion versus Justice. My two dark horses, I'd say, my two most volatile teams here. I've got the Justice winning this one. I think most people would have the Fusion taking this one away, but I don't. Unlike the Hunters games, I think this game could really come down to a battle of the pop-offs, to be honest. I think watching Decay versus Carpe is going to be very nice, and I think Decay should consistently get the better end of Carpe if that's a Tracer matchup. to be honest, because I just think Decay is that much better than Carpe. Then we look at the tank line. I think the Justice tank line is much better than the Fusions as well. Hotbar versus Fury. I think Fury should be able to take that one every day of the week. And then Mano Mag, bit closer. And then the support line is probably where Justice does fail. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not in a terrible way that they fail. So just go back there if you want me to explain it again. Alright, then we've got a North American matchup, the Gladiators versus the Fuel, and I feel this is where the Fuel's great season, bounce back season, comes to an end against the Gladiators. I think Gladiators are just looking too good as of recently, whereas the Dallas Fuel are looking too bad as of recently. These are definitely the two juggernauts of the North American region, so it is going to be a fun matchup to watch. See who progresses on to Elimination 3 to face the Justice, but I think the Gladiators should have it here. Alright, winners final, Chengdu Dragons. Dragons take that, easy peasy. Elimination 3, Justice Gladiators. Gladiators take that. Losers final, Gladiators Chengdu. Gladiators take that. Grand final, Shanghai 4, Gladiators 2. I know those last game I just sped through. Sorry. If you want me to talk more about them, comment down below. Share to your friends. Let's go, champ. See you in the next one.